Hi, I'm Mr. Furtado, and today I'm going to talk to you about the Sony EX camera line and what you're going to need to do your camera practical. So right in front of me are our cameras. So these are actually, this is the Sony EX1 right here, as we can see. Now the Sony EX1 is a little different, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Here's the Sony EX3 right here that I'm talking about. And over here is the Sony EX3, but the only difference is we have what's called a matte box in front of it. It's the same exact camera as this one. You may think it's different, but it just has this matte box right here that's detachable. So we've removed the camera lens hood. So don't worry about that. I'm going to go ahead and clear these off, and I'll talk about each one, and we'll walk you through it. So let's start with the Sony EX3. So the Sony EX3 is a 1920 by 1080 camcorder. It was released in 2007. So it's a pretty great camcorder, a little old by now, but it's a great camera. It'll work out great for you. So if we look, there's a couple key things you want to have here. You want to have a battery. This is a double battery, and there's a single battery about half that size. So you want to have one of those. You need to have your camera card. So the camera cards are kept in this case, and you need to see the camera card supervisor. So inside you'll see the camera cards. And what you're going to do is you are going to first tilt. This is called the viewfinder right here. So the viewfinder has what's called the eye loop. This is the eye cup right here. So the eye cup allows you to kind of cushion it. You want to make sure that you clean the eye cup before every use so that you don't accidentally get something or catch something. So you want to use the sanitary wipes and make sure that these are cleaned every time you use them, because you have no idea who's using that, sticking their eye there. That's Cameraman 101. So this pops up with a little latch underneath. And if you look here, you can see the LCD viewfinder that's inside of here. This can actually detach from a little latch if you wanted to not have this on, and you can take it off. So on the front of the camcorder, if you look here, you will see that there are some settings right here. So what do these settings do? These adjust the settings within the viewfinder. They don't actually affect the image that's recorded inside of the camera. And right here we have peaking, contrast, and brightness. So brightness obviously adjusts the brightness within your viewfinder. Contrast adjusts the difference between black and white within the viewfinder. So if you adjust the contrast, the difference will be more or less extreme. Peaking is actually artificially sharpens the image inside of your camera. And what that does is, so say that you're in a really low light scenario and you can't see if something's in focus, you can turn that up just a little bit, and you can actually sharpen the image. And as you adjust the camera focus, it'll actually help you focus easier. Underneath it, you will see the zebra button, the display info. So if you just want to clear off all the information on the display so you can just concentrate on the image, you can click that. It'll turn it off inside your viewfinder, and that way you can just concentrate on the image, and you can put it back when you need it. Over here is a mirror image. So if you need to kind of mirror the image within the viewfinder, you can click that on or off. Zebra stripes, it is a system that helps you with exposure. So once you click on zebra stripes, you can go inside the menu and adjust it. The default level is around about 75%. That's way too low. You want to take that and turn that up to about 95 or 98%. So what that does, you'll see these little hash marks inside of the image in the bright areas. And what that's telling you is those, if they're set at 95, wherever on the menu it's set, that will allow you to notice the exposure setting. What is too overexposed according to that setting? So if you set it at 75% and you look even at lighting like I'm lit right now, it's probably going to say part of the image, a quarter of the image is overexposed. But that's not true in this scenario. So depending on the scenario and the setting, you can actually set that. It can help you catch overexposed images. So in a different video, we'll talk about that. Over here, if we look at the front of the camera, we have a couple different things. We have the lens hood, and right here is the lens shutter, which opens and closes the shutter. Now it's not to be considered the shutter speed. We also have the focus ring, and as we turn this, you'll see these different numbers come by as they rotate. Those are feet and meters, if you look here. And if you look right here, it says AF and MF. What that does is if we pull the barrel forward and we adjust that, notice how the numbers don't change. That means it's stuck in autofocus. And if we push it back right here, so it's a full manual focus, and you hear it click, you'll see those numbers start turning. It's in manual focus. Right here, this little bar that's sticking out, that is the zoom adjuster. And what that does, that's the zoom ring, so you can zoom in and out on the image. We'll talk about that in a minute. Over here is the aperture setting. So with aperture, you can actually adjust it, and these are in stops. So every stop on the ladder, you are doubling or halving the amount of light that you let into the camera. So if you look right here, so we can go all the way down to 1.9. So right up here is steady shot. Steady shot actually helps you. You'll see when you press that button, you'll see a little hand appear inside your viewfinder. And what that does is it steadies your shot if you're doing handheld a little bit. Right here we have iris settings, and we have manual and we have auto iris settings. What does that do? You want to make sure that that's set to manual, pressed all the way over towards the lens of the camera. If it's set to auto, that means that the motor is engaged here on the iris, and if you start adjusting it, you'll actually break the lens of the camera, and you can actually do serious damage to the camera. So make sure that's in manual, and you can actually manually adjust it. Only extreme situations would you put that ever on auto if you're a professional camera operator. So you look down here, we have macro setting. So macro, what macro does is it allows you to focus really closely. If something is close to the lens of the camera, if you click it on macro focus, it engages a system where you can focus really closely to the camera. Right here, if you look way at the bottom, you will see focus, the manual and autofocus. And what that does, the manual and autofocus, you always want to have that set on manual so you can actually turn the barrel of the lens and you can actually manually focus. If it's set to auto, no matter how much you turn that, it's just going to autofocus. And underneath that, there is a push to autofocus. You can have it in manual and just press that if you're kind of unsure about the focus, and it'll the autofocus will engage just briefly while you hold that button down. Over here, you will see the lens lock. What happens with that, if I open this and I can take the lens off the camera, if you see in here, the Sony EX1 uses a 1/2 inch CMOS sensor. You can see it inside there. And what that does, this is an exchangeable lens camera, meaning I can take these off and I can put a different lens on there. And so you don't want to take those off at your guys' skill level. Just have me remove those or put those on. Takes a little bit of adjustment to remount it. So let's move on. Over here we have the neutral density filter, and then what that does, if you click it, you'll hear it click. And what that does is it takes the filter wheel and adjusts it and rolls the filter wheel. You have 2 stops of filtration. And what do you use filtration for? Filtration is used for when you're outside and it's really overexposed and you've stopped down on your aperture, but you still it's really overexposed and you're at pretty much like f/16 and your lens is almost closed. So what are you going to do? You're going to engage the filter to step 1 or step 2 if it's really bright. So basically it's sunglasses for your camera. Moving on from there, we have the white balance. So what does the white balance do? The white balance is located right here. There's an A, a B, and a preset. So what does that do? What these are is their memory storage. You can go A or you can go B, or you can go to preset. Preset will switch between different white balances as you'll learn what white balance is in the class. So typically speaking, you have 3200 degrees Kelvin indoors and 5600 degrees outdoors. So often you will actually, in preset, it will automatically switch between those when you press the white balance button located right underneath the lens release lever. So there's a little button here, if the camera can see it, and it says white bal. So right underneath the hook of the camera, you press that, hold it down, and inside of the camera, it'll flash up and say 3200 or 3300 or 5800 or 5600. And that'll tell you, you have to tell the camera what white is, otherwise it doesn't know. It's not like the human eye. Our human eyes do it automatically. But if you go to preset, will switch between just 3200 and 56. If you go to A or B, you can actually tell it which one that you want it to do. So that's kind of cool. You switch it up to A or B, then you have someone hold a white piece of paper right in front of your talent's face. You zoom in on it, fill the screen with white, then hold that button down and white balance. Moving on from there, we have the menu button. The menu button is where you click and you have this little rotator wheel. What that does is it allows you to go into the menu and set the resolution and the frame rate, all your other settings inside the camera. You have the gain function. The gain function is set to L, M, and H, low, medium, and high. Gain is basically artificially increasing the sensitivity of your camera sensor. So when you're in really low light and you can't get any more light, you might want to move up to medium gain, and if you're in extreme situations, high gain. But as you do that, you're going to introduce more noise into your camera signal, and it's going to get really noisy and ugly looking. You can actually, have a preset, but you can go inside the camera menu and you can change those to be different values. Right here next to frame rate, if you hold this button down, it'll glow. That will allow you to actually vary the frame rate from 24 frames to 30 frames to 60, and you can do slow motion and time lapses. So that's kind of cool. Full auto, if that is glowing, I'll go ahead and pop a battery in here. Right down here is the on-off switch. If it's in camera, you'll see it boot up. The aperture will rotate back and forth. Cool. Now it's up and running. So underneath here, if you actually see that light, if it's green, that means it's on full auto. No matter what manual settings you adjust, it won't allow you to do anything. So you want to make sure that is off. Only in extreme situations would you ever do full auto. So you get your frame rate dial. We talked about that. Okay, so there's other buttons on here. You don't really need to know what a lot of these do. They're not really important in the beginner level. Again, on off. If it's in camera, that allows you to shoot. If it is in media, that means you can watch and play back clips inside the viewfinder. In order to do that, if you switch it to media, you can look at the top of the camera and you'll see these playback buttons. So there's play, forward, back, you have stop, you have previous and next clip. That way you can actually, if you're out in the field and you want to watch something back, you can click it to media and do that. Also up here we have a cancel button. We have a little joystick, and so if you don't like the wheel to control the menus, I kind of like that one. And then we have the monitor volume. That's really important because the monitor volume, often or not, when you reset the camera, you are going to have issues. And you plug your headphones in, I can't hear anything. But the problem with that is because the automatic default setting is that the headphone jack is set to 0. So you have to turn that all the way up and you'll start hearing sound. On the front of the camera, we have a stereo microphone, right and left, just like facing the camera. Over here we have this little screw here, and it opens up, and you can actually mount a microphone inside the camera. The microphone inside of the camera is not that great, but if we look here, we can actually mount an external one right there. And we can put it in there, and we can buckle it down, and we can turn that on there. We have a couple hot shoes. So these hot shoes allow you to mount, say, a light or a wireless kit you can put on there, or you can put a monitor. There's one on the back right here, and you can actually put a monitor. So you can have a monitor and you can have a light. You can have multiple different things going at the same time. So let's rotate around to the other side. This is the zoom rocker. And so if this is engaged, the camera, we turn it to camera mode, we can actually see the zoom rocker engage. So right here we have a W and a T. That's wide and tight. So when you want to zoom, you zoom in, you zoom out. And if you look at the directions that they're heading, wide goes away from the lens of the camera, and tight goes towards the camera. So it's pretty kind of explanatory right then and there. On the back of that, that's your zoom handle right here. You stick your hand through here. On the back of this, you'll see a record button. That allows you to press record right there with your thumb. Right here's a button. If you hold this in, you can rotate the grip. So that's kind of cool. There is a little focus expand button that allows you to kind of right here on top, that allows you to, gives you a little bit of assistance with your focus if you need to check focus. If you record a clip and you immediately want to watch it without going back to media mode, you can click that button and you'll watch the last clip you just shot over again. Over off to the side, you have some monitor outs. The DC in that allows you to take direct current in for your power, but you don't have to worry about that. This is a standard definition in. You don't have to worry about that. Back here is the battery of the camera, and the way you mount it is, go ahead and turn the camera off. So this is one of the key things you need to know how to use. There's a button on top of the camera located right here. You're going to press that and pull the battery up and withdraw it. If you look on the battery, I don't think you can see that in the camera, the battery has little teeth on it. And if you look at where they should be facing down. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that into the camera, you're going to slide it down, and you'll hear it click, and if you look, the top of the battery release lever should be flush with the camera, and you won't be able to pull the camera out unless you press that button, the battery, unless you press that button. If you want to make sure, some of the batteries have indicators on top, and you press it has all the bars full, that means it's a full battery. If not, it's not full. We can look back here. We have a couple different things. We have some other input and output jacks. You can connect a remote cable up for a television production. You have gen lock in and time code in. Time code allows you to sync time code to all the cameras. Say we're shooting a multi-camera show like we're doing right now. Well, you could actually put time code in, sync all the cameras, and it'd be really easy to edit. Gen lock allows you to sync all the settings across multiple cameras. SDI out, that allows you, if you pull this little rubber cover off, what that does is it allows you to take a video signal, a high definition video signal. SDI stands for serial digital interface. You can take that out and you can plug it into a monitor or a big TV or another big monitor, or you can send it to a switcher or anything. That's how you get a really high quality signal out of the camera. Rotating the backside, we have our audio controls. So our audio controls, if you look here, it says audio in, audio select. So audio select is, if you go to auto, it's automatically going to start setting your settings for you. But you don't want to necessarily do that. You want to have that in manual. So manual. Then we have interior or exterior microphone. So interior is going to set it to the interior microphone that we talked about earlier on the camera. But if you set it to exterior, it's going to set it to the audio jacks, the XLR audio jacks on the camera. So you want to have that usually set to exterior. There's a little cover. If we flip this open, this is where the audio levels are set. So you'll see channel 1 and channel 2. So wherever we set that, we can set the audio levels. So that's kind of cool. And what that does is that controls the input. If we rotate around to the front of the camera, the inputs of these XLR jacks. So these XLR jacks, this is called the XLR preamp. And what that does, this little box allows you to take external microphones, like I have over here on the table. You can plug them in with an XLR cable, and you can actually get a handheld mic or a lavalier or anything like that. So mic plus, there's actually 3 settings. There's mic plus 48 volt, and line. And we'll talk about those more in another video. But mic is a typical, say like a handheld microphone. Mic plus 48 volt, those are typically wireless microphones, or lavaliers or boom mics require that. All 48 volt means is it needs power. And line level is if you're taking like a line level signal, say like an external, like a DVD player, or from another board, like an audio board, someone send you a signal, you might take a signal in right there with that. So typically you might want to be on mic or mic plus 48 volt. It just depends on what you're shooting. So you're going to come in there, and that's why you would adjust the audio settings in the front. Over here, we have the S/S card. If you open that up, you will see that there's a little ejection lever here. What that does is it pops out. Now this camera uses what's called S/S media. That's kind of expensive. So what I've done is I've used this adapter. Now this adapter you don't need to take out of the camera, but if you did, you can eject it like that. Then you can utilize affordable SD cards, and you can take these. They need to be class 10 SD cards. You can insert them. You got to make sure the little gray tab is turned up. You can insert them. You'll hear a click, and you slide that back in. It only goes one way. Make sure you close this flap because this can get torn off. That's really important. You can shoot. You come back out. You press it up, and it opens up. But you don't need to eject the whole thing. You can press the SD card inside of there and pull it out. You can import your footage, pull it back in, you press it in, clicks, close the door. So I think that's pretty much, this is the camera, this is the tripod plate, the camera plate right here. So that allows you to mount it on the tripod as we talked about in the earlier tripod video. So I think that's pretty much it. What do you need and what is required to set up? Oh, here's another one. Right here you have a little screw. What that does is it allows you to open this, rotate this lens hood, and pop the lens hood off. Say that you wanted to put a matte box on, then you can put a matte box on. Or say you need to take the hood off for a specific reason. Now, but be careful because it's kind of hard to like thread it back on there. And make sure you don't lose the screws because the screws can be really expensive. Most of the little external screws on a camera like this, they can be, $50 to $100 a piece. So we just want to make sure we're keeping track of that. So what's the difference between this model and this model? Pretty much nothing. The only difference is we have what's called a matte box on this. What this is used for is to insert what are called filter trays. Now these filter trays, this is a 4x4 filter tray for a matte box. It allows you to put glass filters in here, and you can put more neutral density filters, just like the little interior filter we talked about. You can put those in there, and they rotate, and or you can put effects filters and different things. But really all this is, there's a screw here on the bottom. Once you unscrew that, you can pull the matte box off. And all of it's basically the same exact camera, but it just has this holder mounted on it. So that's the only difference. So you can take that, remount it, make sure you tighten it, set it up. Now with cameras, you want to be careful. You don't want to really, really like tighten them like really tight. You just want to be real careful about that because cameras are very expensive. They're tens of thousands of dollars and they're delicate. But what's the difference between that and the Sony EX1? This is the Sony EX1. Not much of a difference. Only difference is our viewfinder and our LCD, the LCD flips open, as you can see right here. Now, you don't want to, over here we can see the information on the screen. We can shoot using the LCD. What you don't want to do is flip it down because that exposes the screen is delicate. We don't want to do that because when we close it, it's going to look like that. That's wrong. Think about it this way. When you're shooting, you want to flip it to the sky and close it. That's the proper way to close it. As you can see, we have an external microphone on this one that's mounted. Same hood. Everything's pretty much the same. Key differences. The LCD viewfinders, this LCD's here, the viewfinder's in the back. The viewfinder's in the back so you can look through it. These, for some reason, the eye cups fell off. But you'd be able to look through there if you were in really bright sunlight, and you can adjust it, your image, and see it. So if you look over here, this is a fixed lens camera versus the EX1 is an exchangeable lens camera. The fixed lens camera means we can't take the lens off the camera. That's important because we can't take this lens off, but it's fixed. That means it's more compact. Other key differences are that the battery mounts horizontally on the back of it. The release lever is right here. If we look, there's our release lever. So the battery mounts horizontally, so the teeth go this way. Another key difference is, it's interesting, this camera has a SDI out, if we look, so that's nice, monitor out. But it also has a nice little benefit, an HDMI, and we talk about that in the class. So say you're hooking to like a TV or something, that's an added benefit of this camera. The EX1 is kind of what we call a prosumer camera. It's for in between professionals and enthusiasts. The EX3 is a professional camera, so it doesn't have an HDMI. And another key difference is the audio. The audio controls are right here on the side, the dials, so they're right here. And the audio controls are located on the back of the camera. Same with the menu setting button. The menu button's on the back. The card door is a little bit different. It's like a little barn door. It slides open like that, so it slides open. This one's real delicate. You don't want to like damage this. So close that. Make sure it's closed. So same thing. We can mount a card in there. We can close that. We have a battery off to the side, and everything else is pretty much the same. So there's also on top of both cameras there is a wide and tight zoom adjuster and a record button. So that's kind of nice. We have a record button and a wide, so you can actually hold the camera down and you can zoom like this and record. So there's two different record buttons. So I hope that gives you a little bit more information about the Sony EX1 and Sony EX3 camcorders. I recommend that you watch the tripod video, and you'll see how to mount a camera on the tripod and balance it, because that's another key part of the practical test and becoming a professional cameraman.